It's the 1920s, and a new sort of bracelet inspired by Milanese goldsmiths has been made for your latest wristwatch.
Hi everyone and welcome to StrapsCo, and yes, today we are talking about Milanese or mesh bracelets as they're commonly known. A type of bracelet that's been on sort of a roller coaster of popularity, going up and down over the years. Currently very hot thanks in large part to the James Bond No Time to Die Seamaster released last year. But before I get too far into this, I want to give a big thanks to StrapsCo for providing the Milanese bracelet that I'm going to be using as an example throughout this video. They actually gave me this for free, and you can also find some links to their site, to this bracelet and their huge range of straps in the description below. So let's get started and talk about a little bit of the history first of the Milanese bracelet. We actually have to go all the way back to the concept of chainmail. This was a type of armor in which instead of big heavy plates, you had little links of metal that formed chains, and this is what was used as armor. The main advantage to this was that it was lighter because there was less metal used, and that was much more flexible, so this allowed better mobility. And that's the real genesis of this type of technique, to make something out of a chain instead of just a big solid plate. Then later on during the Renaissance in Milan, one of Italy's most prosperous cities and to this day the fashion capital of the world, goldsmiths started using this technique for jewelry. It meant they could create something out of gold, something out of metal that had the same sort of flow as a textile, but obviously still the luster of gold. It made for a new world of possibilities in what could be done within jewelry. And this is where the origin of that term Milanese comes from those goldsmiths, those jewelers in Milan. Milanese meaning, of course, of Milan in Italian. Then in the 1920s, companies such as Staib were founded, and is still making these types of bracelets today, supplying companies like Breitling and Omega with their mesh bracelets as well. And then the last major development for the mesh bracelet, before we start talking about modern times, is in the 1970s with the introduction of the Omega Ploprof. This had what was known as a shark mesh bracelet, and the reason for that is because it was the same sort of technique used by people who would go diving with sharks. They would put on sort of these chainmail armor underneath their scuba suits, just in case they happened to get a bite from a shark, they could at least have some level of protection. And that was carried over onto this dive watch. It gave it a much more rugged look, but also again, mobility and comfort were a key consideration. So that's a very brief history of Milanese bracelets, but they've made a lot of appearances over the years. A few examples of mesh bracelets used in current production watches, of course you have the Breitling Navitimer and the Superocean Heritage lines, both of which make liberal use of mesh bracelets. Breitling has actually been using these for quite some time, both historically and in modern and more recent times. Think also things like the Transocean. Another great example is the Ulysse Nardin Diver 42. This is actually available both on a mesh bracelet or on a standard steel bracelet, and it shows the sort of versatility that you can get out of having this type of bracelet. It gives it a completely different personality. And that brings us right into the pros and cons of a Milanese bracelet. Why would you want one to begin with? Well, the first reason is it's an easy way to completely change the look and give a watch a much more vintage vibe. Because these started being used for watches around sort of the 1920s and had a lot of resurgence throughout the 50s, the 70s, instantly they make a watch look a little bit more old school. It gives it a little bit of that flair and a nice balance between sophistication and utility. The second reason harks back to the very first reason that this technique was invented to begin with. The flow, the mobility, the comfort. These bracelets by and large tend to be much more comfortable than a standard link bracelet, and also they tend to be a little bit lighter on the wrist as well. So this allows for a different feel as much as a different look when you're talking about the bracelet. And then the last big advantage is that because it's a series of tiny little links instead of big slab-sided plate links, you could kind of call them, it means that the propensity for scratches to show up on these is much less. Obviously they're still made of steel or gold if you get a golden one, so they still can scratch, but in the same way that a polished center link will show a scratch much more than a brushed center link, all of these mini links means that the surface area for a scratch is much smaller. It means you don't really notice it as much versus a standard link bracelet. And that's a big advantage if you want your watch to look pristine for a longer amount of time. But of course, nothing is perfect, and Milanese bracelets do have a few disadvantages you should be aware of. The first one is that in general, it's very difficult to create a proper integrated look with a Milanese bracelet. For the most part, they tend to be straight bars, which depending on the length of your lugs, may mean that you have a big gap between the case and when the bracelet bar starts. So if that's something that bothers you, then definitely do look out for that. The second disadvantage is that while these do have a great look, they don't necessarily go with everything. That vintage vibe doesn't really pair well with something like a hoodie or workout wear. And even some more formal wear, but that might be more elaborate or that has a different sort of time period. Like if, for example, if you're into Versace Baroque prints, for example, it doesn't really match either because this is still a very stylized accessory at the end of the day. This is something that goes much better with sort of block or simple colors, simple patterns at most. So you don't want to pair it with something that's also very stylized because you'll end up having clash. And the same goes for the design of the watch as well. These don't go with every watch. I was actually surprised that this ended up looking so good. I knew, having seen the No Time to Die Seamaster, that it would probably be safe, but these don't go with every watch. This, for example, on an RPA offshore would look ridiculous. Or something like a Bell & Ross might look really, really odd and out of place on a Milanese bracelet. So just something to be aware, not a deal breaker, but something to be aware of as you're deciding on these. And when it comes to picking one of these, well, you know, there's a lot of options. First off, the StrapsCo one costs only $20 and it's very solidly built. Honestly, I can't complain. I think that it's great value for money. I've had this for about a week. I'd be interested to see how it holds up in the long term, but it's very comfortable. It fits very easily. The clasp doesn't really take up a lot of space, so it's easy for this to go under a shirt cuff. Right now, I'm very satisfied with it, and for $20, you can't really go wrong. And especially if you just want to test out this look like I did, then definitely I recommend going for something like that. The next step up is if you get one from Staib. Those run anywhere from about 150 to 250, even $300 US. The main difference with those is the thickness and also different clasp designs. That's what accommodates that sort of range. And then the last option is getting an OEM bracelet. Now these will vary entirely depending on which brand it is, which model. For Breitling, for example, it ranges to about sort of $800 US from ones I've seen on Chrono24. I'm assuming that's with a bit of a markup and a margin. But also if you look at their models, you'll see a price difference of about $500 to $600 US between a bracelet born variant and a leather strap born variant. So obviously in those cases you're paying a lot for the branding. In some cases you might also be paying for proprietary clasps like with the Omega. So those sorts of things do factor in. It's down to you to decide on the value. But definitely there's a big range, and I personally would recommend going with something like a StrapsCo one, at least to test out the look first and see if you like it before you invest in something that costs a little bit more. So that's a quick overview of what Milanese bracelets are, what the history is, what the different things to consider when buying one are, and obviously the different price options you have. Again, I'd like to give a big thanks to StrapsCo for providing me with this strap for free so that I can make this video. I definitely recommend you check out their Milanese bracelets. Like I said, they start from as low as $20, and I think they range up to only about $50 depending on size and finish, and they do ship worldwide. So definitely a great option if you'd like to try out the look of a Milanese bracelet, or even as a long-term keeper. Like I said, I've had this for only a week, and I haven't had any problems or any issues, so I imagine this is something I'm not even going to bother replacing with a Staib or an OEM one in the future. But in any case, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of Milanese bracelets? What do you think would be the best watch to go with one? What are your thoughts on things like the Omega No Time to Die, where they've really reinvented the look of a watch by changing out its bracelet? Do you like that style, or do you prefer the standard Seamaster bracelet? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you like this video, make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures of how this Milanese bracelet looks on my Omega, as well as seeing some of the infographics that I use throughout all my videos, make sure you follow me on Instagram at StrapsCo. And if you want to keep seeing new watch videos, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. And last but not least, thanks for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.